the hardest thing I've ever done in my career was bring professional football to Brooklyn. Okay, just getting to the starting line. It was the hardest thing to do. I mean, number one, to come up with that vision. Number two, we spent years negotiating franchise rights and territory rights, dealing with the city of New York, finding a place to play, even today, dealing with infrastructure challenges and facilities. I mean, and it's one of the most complicated markets in the world to do business in Brooklyn. We've had groups come to us and say, "Hey, we'll buy this from you. We'll pay 5 times what you paid for Brooklyn and let us run with it. Let us deal with the operating obstacles and headaches and all, but we're looking at this with a much longer view, longer term view. You had the World Cup coming here in 2026. I mean, why would you give up the potential and the upside with all of the green space, in front of us?
Welcome to yet another installment of Behind Greatness by Inspire. It's Luciano here speaking as your host. Welcome back. And before we get into our next discussion here with returning guest, Matt, just want to remind, as per usual, new listener and veteran, feel free to rate, review, share. It has been working, especially the sharing part. Go for it. We're on every podcast platform, including the one that you're listening in now, obviously. We have a YouTube channel, of course. Chris, our producer, has been working hard on refurbishing it these last several months, and we've been very happy about the feedback that we're getting there too. So you can watch us there. We don't have all our episodes there, as our regular listener knows. We've been doing this for 4.5 years. We've had our not-for-profit for 13 years, going on 14 years since 2011. So we don't have all of our episodes there on YouTube, but you just go to our website, behindgreatness.org, and you'll see our content and library there right from the beginning, from May 2020. As we're recording this, we've just passed the 200 mark in terms of episode number. And we always feel like we're just getting started. And Matt here, who's a returning guest, was like you're like a veteran alum as a guest. He was from episode. I just checked it this morning. You're episode 43.
Okay, wow.
Which feels like ages ago. Feels like the 1980s. It's like that was like a retro episode. But anyway, so the voice that you kind of heard there belongs to Matt Rizzetta. If you feel inclined, check him out in our first conversation in episode 43, as mentioned. I'll go over very quickly in his bio so that you kind of get to know who we're speaking to here before we actually speak to him. So Matty's a founder. He is the founder and chairman of North 6 Group, family office operating company with investments in marketing, media, technology, sports, and entertainment. Prior to funding North 6 Group, he served as CEO of public relations firm N6A from 2010 to 2020. Under his leadership, it grew to one of the fastest growing firms and was ranked as one of the 50 most powerful agencies in the US by The Observer, PR Week's Best Places to Work, and the top company cultures in America by Entrepreneur. In 2023, N6A became N6 powered by KRMA. Can I say Karma?
Karma.
Following the merger between N6A and Karma, leading digital marketing and AI-enabled marketing solutions provider. Rizzetta has expanded and diversified the business interests with North 6 Group, including acquisitions of European football clubs, Dagenham Redbridge and Campobasso FC. In 2023, he led North 6 Group on the acquisition of Brooklyn FC, first professional expansion soccer franchise in the history of Brooklyn. He is also the author of 2 books. First book, Embrace the Pace, 10 Most Exhilarating Lessons Learned in a Decade of Entrepreneurship. And the second book, The Death of Irrelevant PR. Welcome back, Matt. Welcome back.
Luciano, always a pleasure to see you and to be here. It's a homecoming in more than one way, obviously, coming back to the podcast. And also we share the same maternal hometown in Italy, right?
Yeah, we do. So maternal on your end, paternal on my end.
Correct. Monteleone di Puglia.
Yeah, we've spoken, like we've exchanged messages at the very least over the last few years since we recorded in 2021. Uh, so that was cool. It was like, I mean, I didn't, it didn't feel like it's been 3 years, and then I finally see you. I go, oh yeah, God damn it, it's been 3 years.
Time flies.
You you've been up to a lot. So when we spoke back then, you had just acquired or you just got into the world of football, like global football and not American football. That was fascinating for me. We didn't talk a lot about it, but we did talk about why you were interested in getting into that kind of business. Um, but before I ask my questions, I wanna ask you something here because I had also forgotten that we had talked about boxing, and I thought that was the lessons that you learned there that you taught, so to speak, or that you imparted to us was very, very cool. I want to go back to it. Um, you boxed when you were in your late teens, early 20s until your fourth year in college, if I remember correctly.
Nothing like that. Yeah, it was a few years. Yeah.
Um, just as a recap and see if there's anything that has changed. The lessons from boxing, how strong are they for you now, and what are they?
No, I think a lot of lessons, I think I boxed from when I was about 19 to 22. So yeah, about 3 years. Was never an incredibly skilled fighter. I think the furthest I got was, I believe it was the quarterfinals of the Golden Gloves, which is a big deal, quarterfinals of the Golden Gloves in New York. And I got knocked out in something like a minute and 30 seconds or something insane. And that sort of taught me, let me get my degree. Let me get my degree and pursue some other things with my life. But no, I mean, the lessons that I learned, particularly from training and preparation and discipline, have carried me really at every stage in my life and career, not just professionally, but also personally. And, many of the same ways that, raise our children and stuff like that are lessons that I learned or took away from the ring or from preparing to fight in the ring now. God, almost 25 years ago that is now.
Yeah, so let's dive in a little bit that because there's a lot of real things to discuss because what most of us know, what most of us are attracted to, and I'm going to use boxing here literally and also as a metaphor, is the show, right? So the show is the big personality, the guy who's 54-0, the guy who draws the big bunnies for the fights. But really, the only way you can be there is if you're doing, and I'm going to kind of quote you by memory, is you were doing, and you were nowhere close to that, right? I mean, you were a guy who you were enchanted by boxing and you wanted to do it for all the reasons that you described earlier. You were running 70 miles a week.
Yeah, in a
You
bad
were in
way.
the gym 2 to 3 hours a day, and this
Yeah,
is
and
all
that's the
for
biggest.
yeah. Go.
That's the biggest thing, Lucian. I think, it teaches you tons about commitment and dedication. I mean, your whole life is really fully committed to not just to fighting, but to preparing for the fight. I mean, that's where you learn your most valuable lessons is in preparation of the fight. The fight is sort of the fight night, and the match itself is just kind of a reward. It's a reward for the hard work you've put in. But yeah, I mean, I would train twice a day, once in the morning, once in the evening, about 2 hours per day, 2 hours per session, so 4 hours there. Then in between, I would do road work and then go to class. And that was basically my life for 3 years. And then when you get home at night, it's all about nutrition and making sure you have the right regimen. And there's mental health, disciplines that you acquire and that you learn around that. So yeah, I mean, to me, obviously it was only a brief period of my life, 3 years, but it taught me so much. And even today, when I think about my my work ethic and the way that I approach my career, a lot of the way that I approach my career today is really no different than it was when I was boxing 25 years ago. Obviously, it's much more mental preparation now than it is physical, but it's very much the same lessons that I learned back almost a quarter century ago now.
So in a sense, what you were doing then, and we'll talk about some of the things that you're doing now, because it's always It interested me when we first spoke, and your your movements in, I'm going to say your career, but that's dumbing it down when I say career. So I don't mean to say career. I mean to say something maybe a little bit more poetic. It's like you're painting your own canvas when you're a boxer, right? And again, I'm using boxing as a metaphor as well. You're painting your own canvas, like you're creating your own world. You're being hypersensitive to all the inputs to what your goal is. And so even doing all of that, you are, and you were, again, if my memory serves me correctly, you were surrounded by people who were even hungrier than you, and people who didn't have the opportunities that you had.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, boxing, particularly back then, it was the only way out for many of the guys, that I was fighting against. I mean, they grew up in, incredible poverty, in very difficult neighborhoods. And, at that time, this was really their only channel to, get out of that environment. For me, it was never the case. I grew up with all the resources around me I needed. I grew up, with parents who gave me everything they possibly could. Showered me with love and with resources and with everything I could possibly ask for. So I was really doing it. In many ways, people actually respected that because I didn't have to be boxing. I did it because I was really driven and motivated to challenge myself to see, how far I could go, and really to test myself to get as close to, my potential and my limit as I possibly go. For my opponents, that wasn't the case. They were doing it really out of necessity. So in some sort of weird, ironic way, I think they actually respected that about me. But, the interesting thing about boxing, it can be a very lonely sport. And I think, it's one-on-one. It's you against your opponent. And obviously you have your people in the corner. But once you're in the ring and the bell goes off, it's just you and your opponent. And it's a very lonely place to be. Training is all on you. It's very, can be very lonely. And it teaches you a lot about, self-belief, being disciplined, having self-confidence. And entrepreneurship in many ways is very much the same. I mean, entrepreneurship can be a very, very lonely game. When you're in the process of creating something from scratch that you believe in and other people doubt you, a lot of the pressure falls on you, and the weight really is on your shoulders. And, that's very much transferable to what I was experiencing when I was boxing. So obviously it's two different types of disciplines, but, in many ways, a lot of the lessons are transferable.
Here's a silly question, because you mentioned two words there in your description of your wanting to train, potential and limit. Today, what do you believe your potential is, and what are your limits?
Well, today, I think I try to look at things today in a much more, in 360-degree view. So if you would ask me, 10 years ago, maybe even 4 years ago when we first spoke on your program, I probably would have been a little bit more linear, I think, in my thinking around that. Now, I just take it one day at a time. I kind of take the world as the world, as it goes. And I sort of have learned to enjoy, I think, the unpredictability of my career and business and life in general. I think that is sort of the beauty in all this. I think I'm probably less goal oriented than I was 10 or 15 years ago. That's not to say I'm not ambitious or whatnot. I'm probably more ambitious today than I ever was, but I'm not in a rush. I'm much more enamored with the journey and with the process and with just taking it one day at a time and just, making incremental progress day by day. And over the course of the long run, usually that tends to pay off. So that's how I've tried to, transform some of the way I approached my career and life in my elder years here at Luciano.
In your book, Embrace the Pace, the 100 Most, is quote unquote enjoying the unpredictability part of the 100?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, I learned that early on too. It's just sometimes you don't practice what you preach, right? But I learned a long time ago. It's this journey, the entrepreneurship journey, is not a straight line. It's a curvy line. It's full of unpredictable surprises and things that you didn't see coming. And when you're in the heat of the battle, oftentimes it's difficult to enjoy that. But nowadays, I sort of know, I know tomorrow, and I know next week and next month and next year, I know there's a whole host of surprises and unpredictable unpredictable things that are waiting for me on the other end. But I've kind of learned to embrace that and to enjoy that. And, you take that as an opportunity also to, your greatest opportunities to grow and to learn come from adversity and from dealing with things that you didn't see coming. So I've tried to kind of turn that on its side and turn it into something that is a positive, not a negative.
Yeah, you're answering these questions that I appreciate your tone. I appreciate the expertise in answering these questions too. You got a very you got a very sports minded sports minded bent to the discussion, which is cool. I mean, I grew up watching sports, playing sports, all kinds. There's an and there's a but. I want to, because I want to understand more of what drives Matt, because you did grow up in a comfortable environment. You had immigrant grandparents, working class, middle class, maybe upper middle class. Like you didn't have to do things in order to survive. Where, and this is something I asked myself too, right? Because I had a very similar background than you, very, very similar, just on the other side of the border. I didn't have to do things. So I had the comfort in choosing what I wanted to do. And it took me a very long time to not even to figure out what I wanted to do, but to uncover what I wanted to do. Because in my life, there were a lot of distractions, like in everybody's life, right? So then when I uncovered what I wanted to do, I couldn't, and I still don't understand the actual reason for the pace, reason for the drive. Have you thought about that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Tell me.
I mean, I think in my case, Luciano, I totally agree with you, by the way. And we grew up in very similar, it sounds like in very similar environments and with very similar backgrounds. In my case, I put a lot of pressure on myself to succeed, for that reason. I felt like I had no excuse in many ways. My grandparents came here and never spoke the language. My grandfather, worked in the garment district, basically in the sweatshops for, God knows how long and God knows what conditions. And, and then they did that obviously to put my parents in a position where they became the first generation that came to this country to, to be educated and to go out and do something, special with their lives. And then I felt like I had no excuses, so I always felt an incredible sense of, I think, responsibility to make something of my life, because I sort of had to do that as a way to repay the people, my parents, my grandparents before me, for making the sacrifices that I frankly never had to make. So I always took that as an incredible challenge, incredible responsibility. And I just always felt like if I didn't do something special with my life, it was kind of like, would have been in some ways, and that didn't necessarily mean make money. I mean, that just means do something maybe that they could not have done with their lives because they didn't have the same opportunity, same resources that I had. So I always put an incredible amount of pressure on myself to do something special with my life, because I felt like I had no excuses. Also, I grew up one of two children. My only sibling, my sister, who passed away about over 20 years ago now, was developmentally disabled. So that was another thing I think that played a role in all this as well. I really kind of viewed myself as the only or the first person in my family tree, in our lineage, that could really do things with my life that others before me never had the opportunity to do. So for me, that was a big deal. I always kind of was weird because I always sort of viewed school in many ways as a dress rehearsal. I never applied myself necessarily, I think, as much as I probably could have in school. But for me, I was like, once the lights go on, once I get out of school and, life really begins and my career really begins, I'm going to, apply myself, not just 100%, but even more than that. And I've tried to hold true to that. I think in, my 20s was all about kind of proving to myself that I could go out on my own and make something of my life and my career and support, my family through my work. My 30s, I think, was much more about innovation and experimentation, doing things differently, doing things, viewing things in a different way. And my 40s now is all about passion. I'm really just doing things that I'm passionate about. That's what took me to soccer. That's what took me to, the businesses we invest in today are really businesses that I have to feel like I can get out of bed every morning and feel incredibly passionate about. And, I think kind of money is a byproduct of that or a circumstance in many cases. And, money was sort of one of my primary drivers, I would say, when I first got started in my 20s. Now 2 decades later, money I've kind of learned is more of a byproduct. If I apply myself and do things I'm passionate about, I do feel like, the financial rewards of that will come. And if they don't, I can live with it anyway because I've had a hell of a good time doing it.
Yeah, that's the problem with money is that, we all need it. I mean, that's not the problem, but it is. We all need it, but not being a slave to it just is so freeing. And this is why I like to talk to entrepreneurs. We like to talk on this podcast to entrepreneurs. I do personally. Artists, scientists, philosophers, people like who are just exploring the above and beyond just because. This is why I ask you, why is it that you are doing what you're doing? So let's go to the soccer thing, because we talked a little bit about that, and I hate using the word soccer because I know it's not soccer. It's something in North America we made up.
What is it, Luciano? Calcio in your household?
Oh, nice. Yeah, it's calcio. Calcio. That's what it is. But, football, let's call it football, right? So you had just started to invest back then, right? More or less. You had just got into the business. But you're painting something else. You're creating something else or something more. Bring us to that.
Well, look, I woke up, it was in my late 30s. It was probably right around the time we did our first interview, 4 years ago. And, I had achieved, I think, certainly by American standards, a healthy degree of success with our marketing firm. And literally I got up out of bed one day and I said, I want to dedicate this next decade of my career to doing things that I really am passionate about. And I thought about my childhood in many ways. And I thought about what memories could I relive through my work that would bring me back to my childhood. And I thought about sitting on my grandfather's lap Sunday mornings, espresso in the kitchen, the smell, permeates their apartment. Yeah. And, it was the golden era, the golden years of football in Italy, calcio, Maradona, Napoli teams, Juventus, AC Milan with Berlusconi behind. I mean, that was like the golden era of football. And that's when I decided, my first investment that I want to make to a project that I'm passionate about is to an Italian football project. We went and we bought a minority interest. Now it's a controlling interest, but at the time it was a minority interest in Campobasso, which was, close to, not too far from where our families immigrated. It was about an hour and a half south of, or an hour and a half north of Monteleone. So for me, it was, and it was this kind of beautiful club that had super passionate fans. There was tons of fans of theirs that had immigrated to North America, to places like Montreal and Toronto and New York. And I really felt like this was a project that I could get behind and support and also build and grow. And the club was really the identity of the entire region. And I felt like beyond being a sporting project, it really was very much a social project. And it represented all of the values that our, families, represented. And so many, not just our families, but so many people who, from all walks of life, from all backgrounds, from all ethnicities, could really relate to. And that's, the story of immigration, the story of hard work and humility. And I mean, these values, and from what I saw, were really represented in this club. And so, I mean, it was an easy decision for me. And then we wound up falling in love with the project, and our minority stake became a majority stake. And now today it's one of, 4 or 5 sporting assets we have in our portfolio. But that was really the beginning of it. And I just really invested in it because I felt that I could get behind it. And I felt like I could sort of help craft a really interesting story, and through a sporting club. And when you're representing a football club internationally, you're the center point of all, sort of politics, language, culture, travel, history, all of that stuff intersects, or meets. at the club level. So for me, it wasn't just about being a sporting club. It was also about doing something that had the opportunity to potentially change, change the destiny of a region.
I love the destiny of a region. And I know you don't use those words lightly, because I mean you have in a sense, right? Because in terms of football success, the team won a promotion last year. Is that right?
Yeah, it was our second in 2 years. We've been really blessed. Our first year we got promoted from. So the story goes like this: when we bought the club and moved from minority to majority, the old majority owner had some compliance issues and whatnot, and we wound up having to restart all the way down from the fifth tier, which is essentially an amateur tier in Italy. And we won the first year. We put the team together in 10 days. We had like no fans. We had no stadium, no players, no staff. We put the whole squad together in 10 days, wound up winning the league. We had 28 wins and only 2 losses, won the league, got promoted to the fourth tier. And then the fourth tier, which in my opinion is one of the most difficult tiers to win, not just in Italy, but in all of Europe, because only one team out of 18 gets promoted. So if you finish second place, basically it's worthless. It's the same as finishing, in 13th place. You have to win. If you don't win the league outright, you don't get promoted. And we were fortunate, after some twists and turns and some typical Italian drama, we wound up getting promoted to the third tier. So that was our second championship in 2 years. And now we're in the third tier. And it's really been very much a Cinderella project. It's been a fairy tale, beyond teaching me about what it takes to run a football club. It's just taught me a lot about, perseverance and persistence and stick-to-itiveness and things like that, and believing in a region, and the region, believes in you back. And it's really been very much a reciprocal type of relationship we have with the people out there. And for me, it's been an absolute love affair between our group and between the people of Campobasso and Molise, and we wouldn't have it any other way.
It's like a nice reincarnation story, so to speak, right? Like it's because your grandparents had to leave that country, that general region, because of war and strife and famine, just like most other immigrants from Europe at that time, right? Came to a new land, had to work hard, had a couple of generations of children, and those children are still pulled culturally back to that place where those bio roots are. And then you build something there. It's like you've completed a circle. I mean, I guess that's an obvious thing to point out, but and maybe a romantic one. But what I found really curious is that you're investing in, and you have been investing in other clubs around the world. So Brooklyn, we mentioned there in your bio, Brooklyn, Switzerland, England, excuse me, England. Did I miss one? Is there another one?
We also have, right now we have 4 clubs. We have Campobasso in Italy. We have Dagenham and Redbridge in East London. We have 2 Brooklyn franchises, the Brooklyn FC men's team and the Brooklyn FC women's team. The women's team is actually already playing, and as of this recording, we're right toward the top of the table. So that's been a great run for us so far too. And then we have a stake in an apparel company called Diaza, which was founded by a Colombian, a former soccer player actually, named Diego Hurtado, and he's done an amazing job to build a real challenger in the soccer apparel space.
And so why are you painting this kind of canvas? Like why these points in the world?
Well, all of those assets, those businesses roll up to a holding company, which is owned by North Six Group. It's called Club Underdog, and Underdog is really the operative word there. I mean, we back underdog projects. Usually I tell people kind of half joking, but whenever we do a project, we always have an arm out, right? Because you have to do it together, arm in arm, and we have our middle finger up because, there's always kind of this sense of we can do it. People tell us we can't do it. We want to say, kind of
love it
in a polite way, screw you guys, we can do it. And that's what Campobasso was. Campobasso started that way. It's in Molise. It's, they say Molise non esiste. It's the region of Italy they say doesn't exist. It's kind of this place that gets overlooked by the larger cities to the north and south, Rome and Naples. It's kind of nestled in there. So we looked at that as a way to kind of very humbly put our middle finger up and say, hey guys, we can make this thing relevant. And that's what all of our projects are. Brooklyn is the same thing. Brooklyn, people have tried and failed to bring professional football, soccer to New York City and to Brooklyn. We're New Yorkers. We felt like we had the relationships and the skill set and maybe the stubbornness to do it. And, so far it's working. I mean, that was a 3 or 4 year process just to even get to the starting line to deal with negotiating franchise rights and territory rights and finding a place to play and dealing with the city of New York and all the, bureaucratic challenges that come along with it. But very much, people were in our ear at every step of the way saying, why are you doing this? You can't do it. So there's kind of that drive. Like when we look at these projects, Luciano, on one hand, it has to be something we feel can be a project that unites, people and really galvanizes people and brings people together. And on the other hand, it's also a project that we want to be told we can't do it, and we want to be able to prove those people wrong at the end of the day.
Love it. You want to be told that. Yeah, that's your driver. That's it.
Correct.
That's your driver. You want to hear somebody say no.
Exactly. I mean, I've always been like that. I think, I don't know if we talked about it on the last chat, but when I had our agency in my office, I had 2 walls. I don't know if I ever told you about my 2 walls.
No. Go.
So I had a bet on wall. So I saved every card that anyone ever wrote me from the first day we started the business, whenever an employee would leave us and they said, thanks for the experience or, whatever. We had all of these. I probably had close to 1,000 cards by the time I stepped down from being the CEO of the agency and started to shift to these other business interests. So I had one wall. It was called the bet on wall. And anybody who kind of bet on us was on that wall. And then I had another wall behind me, which was the bet against wall. And those were basically any kind of notes from people who told me I couldn't do something, I put on that wall. That was my bet against wall. And those were my 2, really beyond my family, those were the 2 main drivers for me in 10 years of business. Every day I would look, straight ahead and I would see everybody who bet on me. And my mission for that day was really to pay them back and to say thank you. And then I would look behind me and I would see the people who bet against me. And my job was very much also to go prove them wrong. And that was kind of my modus operandi, if you will, for 10 years. It was a mission to both prove people, to thank people for betting on me and to proving people wrong who bet against me.
So I know you well enough to know that it's not anger that pushes you when you want to show people to prove them wrong. Why do you want to prove them wrong? Why?
Well, I think it's hard to teach that. I think that is just you either have that or you don't have it. And I still to this day, I think it's really rooted in a thirst to learn, and to improve. And the people who tell you can't do something, they're not necessarily telling you don't have the ability to do something, but they're telling you that today, they don't believe you can do it today. So for me, it's almost like it's almost like a call to action to improve yourself and to learn and to show those people that you got better. And I think when you show people you got better, I think there's nothing, more beautiful in life than making progress and showing people that you've improved, because it also shows that you have the humility to realize that, you haven't arrived. There's never a point of arrival in your life. I mean, every day is a day where you want to learn. So if somebody tells you can't do something, they're really just saying, hey, Luciano, we don't think you could do this today. So go prove us wrong and go do it tomorrow. Go do it a month from now. Go do it a year from now. And I think when you do it, it demonstrates to them that you have the humility to realize that, you can and will improve and get better by the day.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing that you said there, because it's very easy to have your ego get involved, right? Your ego feels, or you feel slighted, or you feel insulted, you feel offended, you feel like you have to do something just to come back and say, look, I did it. But it's really like your ego is important because it allows you to survive, right? And I remember the story that you gave about starting your business with a pregnant wife who gave you a blessing at 26 in the basement. I mean, it's not a unique story, but it's also a story that it isn't as common as we think. Like, most of us don't do that. Most of us don't, again, as a metaphor, don't start from nothing in a basement just because. So your ego helps you survive, but if you keep it in check to make sure that it's there to help you survive and not as an impediment to the actual growth, and to understand, and this is why I also want to talk to you again for the second part, because I like the fact that you are, you're not telling me that you have a goal. I mean, maybe you're fibbing. I don't know, but I see the last 3 years I've been kind of following tangentially your path, and it just seems like a natural way of doing things. So I'll tell you why I've just said this. So to go back to where in the world you are investing in football, are you looking at making them, or are you making them interconnected?
The clubs?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the clubs, they have to make sense as part of our overall, portfolio and mission and value statement, value proposition. These are underdog clubs with, in strategically desirable locations across the world that have the opportunity to, be built into brands and also have shared resources. So, if you're playing for our Italian team in Campobasso, that could be a potential scouting network or pipeline into our club in London with Daggers, and ditto for Brooklyn. So each club, has a purpose in our overall portfolio and sort of talks to each other in a way where 1 + 1 = 3. The value of the the sum of the parts kind of statement. So that to us is important. And I think just to hit on something you said earlier, I don't. It's not that I don't have goals. Believe me, I have probably more ambitious goals and loftier goals today than I ever have, but they're not necessarily financially motivated goals. My goals today are much more focused on legacy and on heritage and on how we're going to be remembered. I mean, we took just as an example, we took Campobasso from nothing in the 5th tier, and now 2 promotions later, we have great international visibility. We're blessed with incredible partners. We have a TV show, behind us. I mean, there's so much stuff going for us, and we get offers all the time to sell Campobasso for, a lot more than I can say without getting into the numbers, a lot more
That's
than
awesome.
we bought it for. But to me and to our group, it's about more than just flipping that asset for a return. It's about building a legacy and, giving back in a way where 5, 10, 15 years from now, that will be remembered for our work there, right? And we also believe that if we do that the right way, the financial return will be even greater. So it's not like we're saying, hey, forget about the financial aspect of it. We're just saying focus first and foremost on the legacy, and then the financial reward will sort of be the byproduct. And Brooklyn is the same. I mean, let me tell you something, Luciano. The hardest thing I've ever done in my career was bring professional football to Brooklyn. Okay, just getting to the starting line. It was the hardest thing to do. I mean, number one, to come up with that vision. Number two, we spent years negotiating franchise rights and territory rights, dealing with the city of New York, finding a place to play, even today, dealing with infrastructure challenges and facilities. I mean, and it's one of the most complicated markets in the world to do business in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
The cost of doing business is considerably higher than it is anywhere. So just to get to the starting line in Brooklyn was one of the most rewarding and gratifying accomplishments in my whole career. And just getting it there, we've had groups come to us and say, hey, we'll buy this from you. We'll pay 5 times what you paid for Brooklyn, and let us run with it. Let us deal with the operating obstacles and headaches and all, but we're looking at this with a much longer view, longer term view. With the World Cup coming here in 2026, I mean, why would you give up the potential and the upside with all of the green space, in front of us? So we're trying to look at this based on our legacy. We could be viewed as the group that brought professional football to Brooklyn. Our women's team, by the way, it's the first women's team professional women's team in the history of the city of New York. There's no other professional women's franchise in the city of New York. So think about
I did not know that.
Yeah,
I did not know that.
There's another team in the NWSL called Gotham, but they play in New Jersey, so that's not one of the 5 boroughs. The last time I checked, at least. So but just think about the legacy you can build for yourself with that, and then the father of 3 daughters. I mean, you're changing generations. You're giving hope and dreams and role models to young women in the city of New York and the metro area that never had, professional soccer players to whom, to aspire to become. So for us, it's about more than flipping these assets. It's about really creating, legacy and putting our mark and our imprint on these projects. And then, by the way, the financial rewards we believe will be a byproduct of our vision and our hard work. That's how we look at all of these.
So I appreciate this as a soccer dad. So my kids played soccer growing up. a lot. I would say too much, for me at least. So I was a cab driver for I don't know how many days a week for years. But there is an interconnectivity that gets played out at the local level. Like, like we don't have to go through all the reasons why sport is great. Team sports are great for development outside of athleticism as well. But there's what's missing. I see in the world of football is a different kind of interconnectivity. So right now, people are connected by brands, right? So you think of like Milan, Arsenal, Barcelona, like those are big global brands in that world, and it connects people in China and Saudi Arabia, in South America, in North America, wherever, right? Because those speak volumes. But there's so much interconnected play with people in that industry that no one really knows about unless you're in it. So I was thinking about this like just the other week, just on kind of mental preparation for this call. I'll give you the example, so bear with me. So my nephew, one of my older nephews, he's been playing so he's from here, he's from Toronto. He's been playing in Uruguay, second division for Primavera, and he was scouted. So this is the interconnectivity, right? He was scouted by a scout who used to play in Atletico Madrid Primavera, who is now in Uruguay. His coach is Italian, grew up, I think, in Firenze. I could be wrong there. I have to fact check that. Also in Uruguay. And the club was developed, like you, Diego Forlan started this club because he wanted to give opportunities to kids outside of Montevideo, an opportunity to play soccer as well. They didn't have to go to the big city. And so all these parties came together for that opportunity for my nephew to play in. And so they invited him as like the number 10, is a midfielder, right? But all of these things happened, but you don't know unless you get caught up in that little local net, right? But all these players, and I mean that figuratively, all these players are everywhere, all over the world. Like there's always somebody connected to some club somewhere in the world who's brought an expertise, who's brought experience, who's brought his connections network. And there isn't, like, that's all happening there kind of underneath, but no one's really taken that. So with your investments, and maybe I'm over talking on this, I don't know, but with your investments, it seems like you're creating like an active network of not brands, but clubs who are taking advantage of the fact that that's how this sport is, but you're bringing it above the surface, the activity above the surface.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on, Luciano. In fact, what we oftentimes refer to it as is we're creating an ecosystem.
Yeah.
And it's really a talent ecosystem. At the end of the day, if I learned one thing in the first 10 years of running and building our agency, talent wins. It's a talent game. If you have the best talent, usually you win. Now, how do you get the best talent? You have to create the best culture, and you have to create the most competitive product, and so on and so forth. But ultimately, if you're able to recruit the best talent, you win. So obviously, as we're thinking about Club Underdog, which is our soccer, our sports platform, we're really talking about how do we create the most competitive and most skilled talent ecosystem across the world. And it starts with a culture, just like we started with the agency, focusing on culture. We're trying to do the same thing here. So talk to anybody. Everyone thinks of themselves as an underdog. They do. They think of themselves as, we all can relate to the underdog. We all can root for the underdog. And I think that's one of the unique things that differentiates some of our business ventures under Club Underdog, is that these are projects that people generally want to see succeed. People want Brooklyn to succeed. They want, if we do things right in Brooklyn, we could have, in my opinion, one of the top 10 to 20 best women's professional soccer teams in the world in the next 5 years. Okay. With Campobasso, we can make history, and we can put this region on the map that otherwise would have continued to, live in the shadows and went unnoticed for, for generations. So we're really changing a generational divide. We're changing the chain of generations in that project. These are what I'm getting at, Luciano, is that these are generally projects that people want to see succeed. And when you have people behind you that want to see the project succeed, you're doing this together now. You're doing this united. It's got an amplifier effect. You're doing this with, thousands and in some cases millions of people, as opposed to doing it all alone. And it becomes a very galvanizing thing. So for us, that's super cool. And we're doing it and that also helps us attract the best and brightest talent to our ecosystem. So for us, those are big differentiators. And it's not, forgetting about the financial resources required to go buy top 5 or 10 teams in the world. We just didn't feel like it was part of our identity. We're underdogs. We're people that came from nothing, and we're just, men and women who are joining hands to try to build something special and build legacies and, change places in the world that otherwise would have continued to live in the shadows and prove some people wrong. And it's been a really cool experience. But for us, it's an opportunity to use that as a message, to galvanize and to unite people, and to really to create an incredible ecosystem of talent that we otherwise would not have been able to create.
Yeah, but an international, a global ecosystem nonetheless, right?
Totally. And that's the coolest part too, is that we have Italian people talking to American people, talking to English people, talking to Colombians, talking to Africans, talking to Eastern Europeans, and everybody. The mission here is that everybody learns from each other, right? And we can all improve and get better together by learning lessons from each other. And that goes back to your question earlier about why, have I always been so motivated to prove people wrong? Because I think it's a demonstration of humility. And I think that's also what we're trying to, teach within our ecosystem, is that nobody is perfect and everybody needs to learn from each other to improve.
There's a lot of authenticity there in that message and in that story. That's not something really we learn about in professional sports, right? Again, going back to the beginning of this conversation, like we see first the pizzazz, the show, right? The big stars, but that's such a fraction of what the world is in that industry, or in this case in soccer, right? In football. Quick story. I mean, because we're talking about underdogs, and I was just thinking. So my brother, one of my sons, and my nephews are Roma fans. So Roma's a big club in Serie A, obviously, right? But they are a very large underdog, nonetheless. Like they haven't won many championships, but there is a cult following there. And if you speak to a Roman, it's like, the stadium, Stadio Olimpico, is church. That's it. And I didn't appreciate it until I actually went to go see my first game at Stadio Olimpico. And we're only talking 2 years ago. And it was incredible. 62,000 people, all singing, chanting at the same time. That's something that we don't do enough in North America, by the way, the singing, chanting, and dancing. We don't do that like they do in Europe or anywhere else in the world, actually. And beside me, so I don't know the songs, right? There's Antonio Venditti's huge. I know some of his songs, but I don't know the chants. So at the beginning, like into the beginning of the game, everybody stood up and started chanting. I'm just like, I have goosebumps. That's all. So I'm watching this thing as a foreigner, right? The kid beside me he's holding the scarf. He's like 9 or 10. And he's just belting out this song. And he's looking at me like, dude, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you singing? Like, he was upset that a guy beside him in this stadium is not singing along with him. And I felt like, I felt so small by this 9-year-old giving me that look like, dude, I don't know what's wrong with you. Leave. Like that kind of look. But when you use the word galvanizing, like he's part of that galvanized culture, right? And it's absolutely beautiful. And that team, as an example, because I haven't been to a Campobasso game, but I use that as an example. They're a huge underdog, nonetheless. But the love in that stadium, the tribal feeling in that stadium is something I will never forget. But I mean, again, I don't know what the point is, but I wanted to share that because I believe in the word galvanizing when you say that. I believe it.
Yeah, by the way, you've hit on the mecca of Italian football. I mean, Stadio Olimpico, Roma, Lazio. I mean, you go there, it's a out of body experience, which and on a smaller scale, I mean, that's what Campobasso is about. It's a religion. It's not just a religion; it's an expression of their identity. I mean, we play on Sundays. We play on Sundays, and then literally from 7 a.m. Monday morning until 11:59 p.m. on Saturday night, all they do is talk about the game from the prior Sunday and the preview of the following Sunday's game. And I mean, they break literally. It's a reflection of who they are. It's literally it hits them at the core in their soul, and in a way that I think no other part of that culture does. And it's very similar to Rome. Obviously, you're talking about on a much smaller scale, but the same type of experience. And in many cases, it's more meaningful because in Rome you have other distractions, other things to hold your hat on. In in Campobasso, there's one thing only, and that's the Campobasso wolves, the lupi.
Apart from your family, what would be the worst thing somebody can do in taking away from you?
Look, I think it would probably be prematurely taking away one of our projects. I mean, we believe in these things. We have, we have deep conviction in what we're building. There's long-term views and long-term vision. And I think to have that long-term vision interrupted, for reasons that were out of our control, prematurely would be, pretty devastating, not just to me, but to our whole group who really has gotten behind this and, shares a common vision and has supported the projects in, very meaningful ways.
What is one of your future meaningful goals? Like a goal that you think won't change?
Professionally?
Yeah, let's start with that.
Well, look, on a professional level, I mean, each of our projects has an individual goal, right? So in the case of Campobasso, the goal is to take the club to heights and levels that sporting wise that the fans have never seen before. The highest they ever got to was Serie B in the 1980s. We're talking about over 40 years ago now. So it's at least to get them to that level and then to get them higher. So we're writing a new page in their history that had never been written before. In the case of Daggers in East London, it's very much the same. The highest level they ever reached was League One. We want to at least get there. And then also really create a culture around East London, which is probably the last part of London that's yet to be gentrified. It still is very much, an immigrant neighborhood, an immigrant section. There's people that have been overlooked that live there. So I think it's really to kind of breathe life and give a, newfound sense of pride and identity to that particular part of the greater London metro area. And the case of Brooklyn is to show people we can do this. Every day I get up, out of bed and, somebody has some reason to tell me why Brooklyn FC long-term is not going to succeed. So for us to show that there is a sustainable long-term home for professional football in the borough of Brooklyn would be an incredible success. And also, to be an agent of change and transformation for how soccer in the United States is done ahead of the World Cup. We think Brooklyn can really be the perfect market to demonstrate that. If you look at the demographic breakdown of Brooklyn, you look at the name brand recognition of Brooklyn across the world, you look at how attractive Brooklyn is as a destination to young players from parts of the world that otherwise might not necessarily have a channel or an outlet to make something of their career, to give them that type of platform. Those are the things that motivate us there. So, each one of the projects kind of has its own goal. And obviously talking to somebody like myself, we want to hit all of our goals.
What do you mean by outcome relations?
Well, that goes back to our, our PR firm and our marketing firm. There was always kind of this view of PR, public relations, as a very immeasurable part of the marketing stack. And we wanted to change that. We wanted to make it outcome based so that brands who hired us, they could actually trace the results that our firm was generating with some sort of tangible business outcome that was meaningful to them, whether that meant improving sales or recruiting better talent or, setting themselves up for an IPO or whatever it might be. So, we were the first to create, a proprietary way of doing PR that didn't just generate results, but it generated results that ultimately traced its way back to some sort of tangible, measurable business outcome that was important to our clients.
Are you bringing that philosophy to your brands right now, to your properties, to your assets?
Well, look, the reality is, the funny thing is in football, it's all about outcomes. They like us when we win, and they don't like us so much. And in Italy, there's statues getting ready to be carved when we win, and there's tomatoes and wine glasses and eggs and stale focaccia getting thrown our way when we don't win. So that's just part of the game, and that was one of the biggest learning lessons for me as we transitioned from a single business to marketing firm to multi-business, diversified portfolio like we have now, is that I can remember 10 years of running our marketing firm. Not one time did somebody pull me off the street and say, Matt, why did you put Luciano on that client account? They didn't get the results I was hoping that they would get. Not one time in my career as a marketing agency executive did that happen. In football, every day somebody's calling you, texting you, sending, Matt, why did the coach play Luciano as our center forward? Why didn't we sign this guy? We're crazy. We overpaid this guy. How can we have tied 2 games in a row? So that's one thing, I've learned pretty quickly, is that when you're in the professional sports, particularly professional soccer, professional football ownership game, it's a very public thing. Every decision you make is incredibly scrutinized, and in a way that nothing, that I was used to in my, my past life professionally, I had dealt with. So for me, there was an incredible learning curve for that.
You got to be able to defend the hooks and the left jabs.
That's it. Going back to the boxing moves.
One of my last questions here. Foul shots. Do you still take them every day?
I do. Foul shots was something I started early in my career. Basically, just every day I would do between 3 and 5. I call them foul shots. It was basically just cold outreach to people that I read about, that I was curious about, just people that I felt I could learn from. And I've taken those basically every day, almost without exception, for, God, it's going on basically about 20 years now. And
without exception, every day.
I mean, I can't fib. I've had a few kind of
take some days off.
But overall, it's been pretty consistent. And as a result of those foul shots, I've come in contact with some of the most valuable relationships, not just professionally, but personally. Some of my best friends today I met by taking a foul shot, and it's been an incredible exercise. I encourage all entry level staff members coming out of college or whatever, just take foul shots. And don't do it for any selfish reasons. Don't think about it as a chore. Don't think about it as an exercise to improve your professional qualifications. Just do it because you want to continually meet new people and learn and, satisfy your appetite for, curiosity and meeting new people and whatnot.
That's one of the ingredients to long-term anything, is to put yourself out there and just to learn from people you don't know. I mean, when I'm asked to give advice, that's one of my top picks from the basket of advice giving, is reach out to people you don't know, and do it often, and create your network, and do it. And it's best when you start doing it young, because when you're young, you have no idea what works and what doesn't work, so you're less afraid. But it's also, to your point, man, if you do it every day, if you do it often enough when you're young, by the time you're 30, 40, I mean, you're far more ahead in the game in not just in building a network and learning and experience, but also understanding how to ask questions better and feeding your curiosity in the meantime.
I totally agree. I think, a lot of times we confuse, money with the most valuable currency. And in my experience, the most valuable currency is relationships. Relationships are the most valuable currency you can accumulate in your career. And then money comes. Money will come if the relationships are there and you're intuitive and you figure out how to leverage them and network, and the money will come, as a byproduct of that. Mm-hmm. So why would you focus on one currency when the most important currency is the relationship currency? That's where most of your time, effort, resources should go when you're starting your career out. And I firmly believe that.
What are you most curious about?
Well, now, a lot of our travels today take us to all parts of the world, and we learn all different cultures and languages. So I think my curiosity nowadays generally is about coming into contact with people from, new cultures, new walks of life, new languages, learning about how business is done in markets where we haven't necessarily had experience in previously. So it's generally those types of things. It's about meeting, new types of people from new cultures, from new parts of the world that I haven't been to before. And then obviously it's just about learning and improving, on a day-to-day basis across all of our business properties, because there's always something new to learn.
What does greatness mean to you?
Well, look, I think the older I'm getting, I think it's probably that greatness is probably equated with humility and simplicity. I think the people that I have the most respect for nowadays are the ones that are probably the most direct, the most transparent, the most humble, the ones who maybe try to simplify things rather than overcomplicate things. So for me, and it's quite different than it was maybe 15 or 20 years ago, but for me, I think that greatness has something to do with some combination of those, those skills.
I'm positive if we have a part 3 4 years from now, that your answer will have morphed as well. Sorry, Matt, go ahead. I interrupted you.
No. I totally agree. And I think that we all should transform and morph and evolve, I think, the way we think about things. So if it didn't, I would say I probably wouldn't have succeeded over the next 4 years.
Ah, I like that. Also to the point. I like that. Dude, it was a pleasure. Thanks for coming back on again. This is very, very cool.
Luciano, always a pleasure, my man. And give my best to everybody in your network, your family, and let's do this. Let's not wait 4 years to do the next one.
I agree.
I don't have much hair left. Left. Let's try to do a few. Otherwise, we'll just do audio only if I lose all that.
Don't worry, I'm getting there too, my friend. Same wishes to you and your network, and tante belle cose, man.
Anche a voi. Un abbraccio.